All right. Well, welcome to the first ever interview from isolation. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Yumi Stynes, who's an Australian television and radio presenter. Um, she currently is the co-host of Kiss FM's 3 p.m. pickup radio show, and also quite fabulously on the ABC's radio podcast, Ladies We Need to Talk, which is about female health and sexuality. I first came across Yumi when she was the presenter on Channel V and was probably almost like this kind of spiritual siren figure in my adolescence, guiding me through what is popular culture, and have since was I think you reached out to me when I first started Hello Sunday Morning, and you were on the circle, and you're like, "This is an interesting, weird thing that's going on. That's an interesting reflection on culture." And you asked me to come on the circle, and the first question, I was so nervous on TV. It was the first time I was on TV, and I see my kind of I'm sort of moving in the TV on the chair like this, and you go, "So Chris, tell us about your year of not drinking, and I mean, what's it done to your sex life?" And I was like, "Oh," like straight between the eyes. And ever since then, I've thought, "Wow, it's that's such a poignant question," and it's been so good to now hear from you again. And you've gone through your own experience with drinking and got in touch recently, and we're like, this is an interesting situation. So it's really good to have a chat with you. So Yumi, tell me about your relationship with alcohol and how it's changed over the last 9 years. Since I
Mm,
did
since
that
we first
interview.
met. Yeah, so I was drinking then and I knew I had to stop. So I'd go through patches of stopping, which I think a lot of people do, especially if they've gone through pregnancies. And you stop drinking and go, oh, this is actually how life can feel and it feels pretty good. Why don't I do this more often, or why don't I just make it my permanent state? And then something draws you back in. And I think people don't know or talk about much how addictive alcohol is. So even though you kind of know rationally that it's bad for you and you feel much better when you don't do it, there's something drawing you in time and time again. So I think I was in that ebb and flow of it, but also very secretive about it with others, but also I think a bit with myself about how bad it was, and how ashamed I was, and how embarrassed I felt to reach out. So I think I've been through a few cycles of that, and at times I've quit for 2 whole years and felt $1 million and then done that thing which people do, and you think you'd be able to learn from others' mistakes, but where you think I've nailed this, I'm so quick that I can have one or two. I can have light beer, which I did do, and I enjoyed, and then I can have one glass of wine, and it's just so um, it's so something that other people can do, but I couldn't do. And I'm sure you're the same. And that's probably most people watching are the same. There are those people who can do one or two, but it's not me. So one or two quickly snowballed into many, many. And then that feeling like like it's like a cat you're trying to take to the vet. I'm digging my claws in. I'm wanting this to stop, but I'm still getting dragged along in the drinking roller coaster. So I sort of I flagged with myself, I need to quit drinking. I need this just out of my life. But I reckon from making that call to actually being able to do it and getting it over the line was probably 8 months.
Mm.
8 months of waking up every morning and saying, okay, today I won't drink. And today's the first day. And then mucking it up by 5 p.m., finding some great excuse, finding a drinking mate or an occasion that made it worth it. So that's sort of where I'm at now. The difference with this particular time of being sober to all the other ones is that I started to talk about it. And so I went to AA meetings, and I went on Hello Sunday Morning. I got the app on my phone, and I immediately felt validated by the community on the app. No one was like, "Oh, you're fine. You don't have a drinking problem." Everyone was like, "Yeah, they know what it's like," and they're not trying to minimize what was very alarming to me. And I think that even my best friends and my partner didn't really see how bad it was. So they were like, "Are you sure that this is such a big problem? Because you look fine to me." And I was I was looking fine because I was working so hard on covering up what was a really pretty scary problem. So I found those things helpful, and I feel very much that my sobriety is bedded in.
Mm.
But it's also something like most days I kind of check in and feel relieved and grateful that I'm not on that cycle of waking up and wanting to quit, but being unable to make it through 24 hours. It's the worst feeling. Like, I'm a grown adult. Why is this so hard? So I'm just, and everything that's been wonderful in my life in the last 3 years has really, I feel it's like a direct link between not drinking, and maybe getting a book published, or, having some show be successful, or even just making a small friendship that might grow into a bigger one. Those are all because I can trust this person is much more ethical, much more reliable, can work much harder and love more truly. So it's all the rewards are constant.
It's amazing. I want to just go back to really when I first encountered Yumi Stynes on TV, and really you were the kind of at the quintessence of popular culture at that time. What was drinking like around then, and do you feel like that kind of relationship with alcohol was formed then that then has changed, or was it what was it like back then through that time?
So I was covering music and music festivals and actors and film premieres and stuff. So it was actually more work than fun. It sounds amazing, but most of the time, if you meet, say, I don't know, like Harrison Ford or something, he's not going to invite you over to hang out afterwards. It's like it's work, but
That doesn't happen.
yeah, but there's also a lot of alcohol in those situations, a lot of drinks and nibbles, or come to our party and stuff like that. I was actually I wasn't sucked into it so much because I had kids pretty young, so I often had to go home, which was lucky. But so there were sort of two facets. There's the work life, which does really enable drinking, and musicianship is the same. If you're friends with any musicians or you are one yourself, it's sort of very conducive to drinking and working. But then I also find that motherhood is the same in a way. Like, it's a situation where you're under a lot of stress. It's fairly thankless. It is unrelenting. And then you actually are allowed and enabled with the drinking, and you can do it at home. You can do it while parenting. So between those two sort of influences and forces upon me, it was really it was a pretty deadly combo. And as well as that, the modeling that I got at home as a child was very enthusiastic about alcohol, and that's something I'm still grappling with even now, is that the sense that a lovely drink is the reward that you deserve, and trying to look, I guess, for other rewards that aren't alcohol is a real trick.
Definitely. And it's so what I'm hearing is sort of coming into motherhood and into really quite a portfolio career and so many different things, and the pressures that has. It resonates strongly with our membership. 67% of our members on Daybreak are women, and mostly in their 40s, with jobs and relationships and families, and just so much pressure. Do you find that when you add alcohol into the mix, those things start to slip or become more difficult? Or what was the experience for you, that you kind of recognize that just not drinking's the healthiest way forward?
Well, so I think when you're under that kind of pressure, even you're not working, but your baby wants you all the time, or your children are nagging or fighting, that drink just, it's like you've unscrewed a valve, and it helps you release, and it helps you turn the volume down on your annoyances and your pressures. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you during this particular time in history, because we're all feeling quite a lot of pressure. And it's in a similar space, that domestic space, where you're like, I just need to get out, but you actually can't. So you try and escape spiritual or mentally. I can't remember what your question was now. What did you say?
So adding all those pressures in there, it's like the release valve. And then now you kind of feel like what do you use now to release that pressure that alcohol once you know, particularly a time through COVID and the stuff
Yeah.
that it has, that's just doubled those pressures being at home with your family and all this stuff going on.
Yeah, and for women, I think it's being everything for everyone as well. So, you know, you're not just the playmate, you're the teacher, you're the chef, you're the cleaner. There's a bunch of roles that everybody wants you to fulfill, and they're almost infinite. So you never really get to knock off. And I think that that's what alcohol can provide for people, is just a chance to feel like, actually, mummy's knocking off now.
Yeah.
When I reflect on how I used to think about, say, for instance, you got a full bottle of rosé or something, and I'd look at that and I'd feel a sense of safety in that, because it meant that my pain would be going away. My pain would be taken care of through that particular medicine, and by the time I got to the bottom of that bottle, you know, I would be feeling switched off and less connected to what was hurting me or stressing me.
Mm.
And then if you want to make some insurance against pain, you'd have a whole case of that, you know, and you'd be like, you know, I feel safe that I'm not going to feel pain for a couple of days, you know. The problem we all know is that you do pay eventually, you pay a price, and it's pretty brutal. So the sort of feelings of stress, the feelings of anxiety, that's right. Your question was about the sort of the way that things would suffer when you're drinking. You would be a less engaged, less loving partner, I think, and often the partners would suffer first, and those relationships would bear the brunt of a lot of anger and self-loathing. But I do think you have to be honest and say, look, I probably would be a better parent as well if I weren't hungover or drinking. And then the work stuff, which is often the one we save our best us for work, which is really bad when you think about it. But when it starts to fray at the work that you can do, and you turn up and you're like, I can barely read this, I can't process this information, or I can only do like bite-sized bits because I feel so lousy. That's when you know that you're really putting more than just your body's health on the line. There's a whole lot of things that are in danger.
Exactly. And coming to this particularly prescient time, this really stressful experience where people are kind of in their homes together. How has this been for you, and your relationship with alcohol, or that relationship with kind of switching off, which is, I imagine, even more difficult right now?
Yeah, it's funny because I've got a beautiful home. There's enough space, I think. I mean, it's not a mansion, but we do get to sort of separate from each other. I've got 3 of my 4 kids living with me, and a supportive and kind husband who doesn't drink. So things should be easy, but I get this strong sense that even though I'm surrounded by people that I love, who love me, a lot of us feel like pillars that are alone and are sort of suffering through this crisis, which is really only just beginning, by the way. We're on the tip of this huge iceberg of calamity. It's really hard to share because it's so boring. You know, you don't want to talk about how much it sucks, and, you know, everyone's going through it, so you're not special, so shut your hole. So I think that even if you are surrounded by people, you do feel a bit lonely, and one way to kind of interiorize that is to have a drink and squash it all down, and, you know, and just kind of get glassy-eyed. So one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you was because I'm feeling so much temptation to drink, really more than I've felt in years, and I can't imagine what it would be like if you were like I was more than 3 years ago, when I was thinking I needed to quit, but I was finding it really hard. I think the temptations are just really being so badly exacerbated right now, and the way that it's been facilitated and enabled by corporations who'll deliver cases of alcohol to your house, and, you know, the limits by booze companies are so extremely exorbitant that you couldn't possibly consume. Would hope that you couldn't possibly consume what they're saying is, you know, the cutoff point. And then, so that's sort of on a sort of big brothery sort of scale, we're being enabled to drink, and that's being facilitated. But on a more macro scale, with friends and people we see on social media and our neighbours, it's like people are drinking at 11 o'clock in the morning. there's no sort of reason to stop drinking at night because no one has to drive home. And as we know, like if you're in a situation, like if you've got on a camping trip or you're on summer holidays and you know you don't have to drive at the end of the night, people in this country can tend to really use that as a chance to hop on and get trolleyed. So night after night of not having to drive or go anywhere or turn up to work the next day, I think it's a pretty dangerous time for a lot of us.
It's, I mean, there's all these enabling things which make it incredibly hard. You're right. You know, it was alcohol was listed, or bottle shops were listed as an essential service on the government thing. And there's interesting research that came out of Canada where the government actually has a controlled monopoly on alcohol sales, and they made the decision not to restrict those sales because of the numbers of people that would go into involuntary detox, that actually that would have an even greater burden on the health system.
Right.
And probably a lot of people were just drinking daily and not even associate their relationship with alcohol as dependent. And yet, if you know, and for anyone that's drinking daily and you stop that, just like if you stop drinking coffee and you drink daily, you experience the effects of that. And with alcohol, they're much more pronounced. So there is this system that is largely built on a dependence of drinking. It's a kind of leaky ship that's been plugged to move along. I want to kind of understand your kind of more finer impulses, and you know, when these cravings do come along, and have someone, perhaps there's advice for some of our members that are just starting out on their journey. What's been really helpful for you, like particularly right now? Like what are your thought processes? What are your actions?
Sure. So before the COVID crisis, I had a daily practice of going to the gym, which I was extremely militant about, really quite humorless about. And it always, you know, when you're like, you're not a very fit person, you're not very active, but you do something physical and you kind of feel this tingle through your body and you're like, I should do this more often. You know, I should go for a walk. This feels really good. So that sort of good feeling, I decided that's going to be my high, and I'm going to pursue that, even though it's dorky. That's how I'm going to feel good. And it is actually an incredibly good high.
You kind of go from I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, I love this. I should do this more often.
Totally. So the way that I used to do it was a non-negotiable. And it meant I never had to think about it. I never had to go, shall I go to the gym? It was like, you are going to the gym. There's no question mark over it. And I really didn't miss any single days unless it was for a funeral or an interstate trip. So now that's been taken from me, and that was a huge concern, and I nearly cried the day I gave up my gym membership, because it's, for a lot of people who don't have a spiritual practice, it can almost replace that. You know, it's very, it does land you in a mindfulness, and you do sort of, I think, almost transcend your earthly self. Without needing God, which is super helpful for a lot of us who aren't religious. So now, what the fuck? What do you do? So one of the things that I do with my thinking is I know how bad it would be to drink. So I'm not afraid to remind myself of, you know, that gutter that I could be in, or, you know, that ruin financial and I guess my family's ruin that I would attract if I started to drink again. But I have been looking for other things that I can do, and things are changing all the time in this environment, but I can at the moment run. So I'm doing a 7K run every single day. And I was set up to do a half marathon in May, the Sydney Morning Herald half marathon. I had my ticket and everything. And I had a bunch of friends that I was egging on to do it with me. And that felt really good as well, to kind of be like the cheerleader, like, you can do it, you know, it's going to suck, it's going to hurt. But I felt I enjoyed that role as well, as kind of coach and team leader. So that's gone, and I was upset about that. But then I was like, actually, if we can still go running, we can still run a half marathon in May. So who's going to stop us from running 21Ks on May 17? So we've decided to do it separately. Like, we won't be running in a group, but we'll all run 21Ks on May 17. And I'm going to make bibs to everyone that they can put on their chest with a number and a daggy name or something.
Right.
And make little cardboard medals or something and post them out to them. So that like there
But
are things that you can do to keep your sense of fun and community that you get from your daily exercise practice. But my fear, Chris, is that there'll be a more strict lockdown and we won't even be able to run anymore. And I think that that's a fairly realistic forecast. So I'm working on doing apps and stuff at home with exercise. And can I just tell you that I have never been more uncool in my life than when I'm doing one of those apps. They're just so ridiculous. And I really, really resisted, but I was like, well, this is probably our future for quite a long time. So suck it up, Stynes. And I did one yesterday and it was fine. It was like, okay, no, first of all, everyone's in the same situation. No one cares if you look cool or not. And I did get a high heart rate and endorphin rush, and and I felt good afterwards. So that I think is going to be my practice as well. I'm going to run for as long as I can. I'm going to use exercise as an excuse to hassle my friends and check in on them and have a common shared goal. And then when that falls apart, I'm going to keep going with the apps at home.
great. So it's like adapting your kind of exercise regime to what's needed right now.
Yeah, and look, if you're thinking about drinking and you're not sure how to do it, I know that exercise isn't for everyone, and trust me, like it's hard to tell on the screen, but I'm small and weak, and I was always picked last for every single team at school. Sport did not have and it didn't center my self-esteem, it eroded it. And I understand people's aversion to doing exercise, I absolutely do, but every mental health expert will tell you that doing exercise will help. So the trick is to eliminate the ways that you can say no to it. So if it's like, oh no, I want to do horse riding, sorry, but that's too hard, we've got no horses, right? So just take away the things that block you from doing it. Okay, so running is so good because all you really need is a pair of shoes, and even then they're optional. But it's really hard to say no. So even if you're like, I've only got 10 minutes, go for a 10-minute run, So I just eliminate the things that you don't like. But if you're really into dancing or something, do a dancing app, or there's other ways to make it palatable.
Mm. And I guess another real concern for our members is their relationship and alcohol, like their primary relationship. What's that been like for you? And you said your partner's sober as well, or doesn't drink. Was it always that way, or was it different in the beginning?
Yeah, so I'm lucky in that he doesn't have much of an enthusiasm for alcohol, and in fact, all of my partners in years past haven't really. I don't know why, but it's just been super lucky, because it would be really hard if he was an enthusiast as well as me. What I found was early on, when drinking was a part of my life, we would share wine and drink when we went out to restaurants and stuff. And he would always participate and do it, joyfully, but he just never had that thing where he couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And so he knows, I think he's sort of understood the seriousness of it with me. And so he's very just effortlessly come along, and maybe if he goes out with a mate and not me, he won't drink. I mean, he will drink with his mate, but he won't with me, and he won't do it in front of me. So he's really supportive in that way. I think if you're with a partner who is an enabling co-drinker, I think that's really, really hard. And it might be a thing where you need to just split off and you let them have that time without you, and it's really important to have those conversations too when you're sober, to explain how you really need support. And if that support can't be him also stopping drinking, maybe it's him just drinking without your presence.
And it becomes a self-reinforcing issue. And we found that on Daybreak with people that, that's why people come onto Daybreak, because they're not getting this crazy sun refraction. Yeah, so that's the Bondi sunrise.
It's like God's like sending you a message.
But sort of lastly, around your family, because your family are enthusiasts for drinking. I love the way you express it that way.
Yeah.
And often people come onto Daybreak and they say, my partner drinks and I need the support, or their family drinks, or the opposite, they drink and their family has spent many years telling them to stop and they feel guilty because they can't. tell me a bit about how you've navigated those relationships with the family.
Um, Look, I try not to talk about it with them because I don't want them to feel like I'm judging them. I've asked that when they come to my house that they don't expect me to supply alcohol. And if they want to bring their own and drink, then I'm actually totally fine with that. I'm not sort of somebody who, if they leave an open bottle of wine, that's a huge risk, I think. You know, maybe in these circumstances it might be different if it was just sitting there and it looked super tantalizing. But I don't want to be boring. So I feel like they if they need to have that conversation with someone, maybe that someone is not me. So I just try and compartmentalize it and know that I'm going to be around people who drink at Christmas or whatever. And that's just, you know, that's just who they are, and that's not who I want to be.
That's a really great way to look at it. And I think, yeah, it's sort of a balance, because I'm sure on one hand they're incredibly proud of you and for the decisions that you're making, but then I'm just speaking from my own experience with my family, and I find an oscillation even within myself that, when I'm with them at Christmas and I find myself drinking with them, it's I sort of fit back into it. But then in times that I'm not, it's very isolating, and it can be something to work through. So Yumi, thanks so much for sharing your reflections, and I'm sure these would be really useful for our community. And yeah, it's a really powerful message and really honest and open and vulnerable. So thank you for going on.
Thank you, Becca. And I just want to say it's a bit like self-isolating. Like sometimes you do leave the house and go and get a packet of chips from the shop or whatever. So I think like being kind to yourself and forgiving yourself if you do transgress is completely okay. But I do strongly recommend just 100% going, I'm that person that can't do it. I'm switching it right out of my life, and I'm putting something better in.
Yeah. Great message. Thank you.
Thanks.